In this video, I'm going to cover the second part of the requirements for the first lab assignment. So for this part of the lab assignment, you're going to be creating your own custom Revit family. This can be pretty much anything that you want that would go into a project. So it could be like a light fixture, or it could be a piece of furniture, or something else that you find that you wish to create. But at a minimum, you have to include the following things within the family. So first, we have to have one nested component. And as we did in the shelving unit family, we had several individual families that we nested together. So you're going to have to do sort of the same thing with at least one component of that family that you're going to nest into a bigger family. You also have to have one dimension parameter that you're going to use to control sort of the size of the family in some way. You also have to have two material parameters. Okay, so we're going to have at least two materials within this family. And then I want you to set up two family types. Okay, so this is basically our set of presets that we can create for a family. So you could set up maybe one type that has a certain dimension to it, or a certain set of materials, and then another type that has a different set of dimensions or materials. You must also use both types of parameters. So the parameters can be either type, or they can be either type or instance parameters, but you have to use both of them. Okay, so for example, let's say that you have the dimension parameter as a type parameter, but then for the material parameters, you set those both up as instance parameters. That would be totally fine. But I would not be happy, and I would mark off points if you set up everything as a type parameter. So in that case, if the dimension parameter was a type parameter, and then both of the material parameters were also type parameters, you would lose some points. And then the same would be true if you did it the other way as well. If everything was an instance parameter, but then one of them was a type, that would be totally fine. But if you made everything an instance parameter, that would also be a problem. Okay, so you can choose to apply the different types of parameters wherever you want with whatever parameters you create, but you have to have at least one type parameter and one instance parameter. Okay, so you have to use both of them within the family that you're creating. All right. All right, so now I've gone over the requirements. I'm going to walk you through sort of a simple example, and I'm going to just build a very basic light fixture family from scratch, and I'm going to include all of these requirements so you can get an idea of what I want you to do. All right, so the best way to start this is just to go to a website like wayfair.com, or you can like search for something on Google. But I just went here and I searched for pendant light fixture, and then I found one that I thought would be relatively simple to create a Revit model of. So this little globe pendant is what I'm going to be making in this video. And again, you can do sort of anything that you want. So if you want to do a piece of furniture, if you also want to do some kind of a light fixture, something like that, that's fine. Just make sure you're finding something that doesn't have a family file already created, because I'll be able to check and see if what you made was original and that you did it from scratch, or if you just pulled it from somewhere. So we want to find something like this where there's no family file already available. And Wayfair is a good site to use for this, because I don't believe they allow you to download CAD files of their products. So once you find something, you should always look for some sort of a spec sheet that gives you the dimensions of the actual object itself. So I'm going to scroll down here, and underneath of specifications, you can see there are these PDF files. So if I go ahead and I click on one of those, it's going to give me sort of a diagram of how this thing is installed. But the really nice thing about this is if you zoom in, you can see this is actually a vector PDF, and anything that is a vector PDF can be used within Revit, and you can pull line work from it directly instead of having to redraw everything, which is really nice for creating these families because it really simplifies the process. One way I can tell this is a vector PDF is because when I zoom in on it, all the line work stays nice and crisp, and it doesn't get pixelated. If it were pixelated, that would be a raster PDF, and you could still use that. You would just have to use it as an underlay and actually draw over top of it within Revit. But either one can be used, and I'll kind of show you both ways, so that if you want to use either of these methods whenever you're creating your own family, you can. But what I'm going to do is download this, and then if you want to extract line work from a PDF file like this, you can use Adobe Illustrator. So if I go to Adobe Illustrator, and I've already done it here, but I'm just going to redo it to show you. I'm going to create a new file, and then I'm just going to choose this web large template and then click create. And then once I'm in here, I'm going to go to file and then place. Then I'm going to locate that PDF file that I downloaded and then place it. And I'm just going to click on my document to place that in. And then I'm just going to move this up a little bit so I can see it. All right, now that that's placed into the document, I want to select it and then go over here to the right underneath properties, and then where it says quick actions, I want to click embed to actually make that a part of the file instead of a link. After that's done, I can go ahead and I can start isolating the parts of this PDF file that I want to take over to Revit and use. Okay, so we have to clean this up a little bit. So with my direct selection tool active, I can go here and I can create a selection box around just the light fixture itself. And then I'm going to click Control and X to cut that. After I've cut it, I'm going to select all the rest of this stuff and I'm going to delete it. And then I'm going to paste back in the actual pendant itself, like that. After I've done that, I'm just going to zoom in a little bit, and I'm going to delete out all the other stuff that I don't want from here. So all of this text and all this up here we don't even need, so all that can go away. Okay, and then once I sort of complete this process and get rid of all these little arrows and everything that I don't need, what I'm left with is something that looks like this. And even this, we don't really need all the pieces. This is sort of just an exploded view, but I'm just going to keep them in here for now. But this should be more than good enough for what I'm going to do. Okay, so once I've done that, all I'm going to do is go up here to File, and then I'm going to go to Export, and then I'm going to go to Export As. All right, then what I want to do is export this as a DWG file. So let's just select this Autodesk Real DWG, and I'm just going to call this light fixture line work, and I will just place that in my downloads folder for now, and then export. Okay, then we're going to get this DWG options. I'm just going to leave it at the defaults. This might actually, we might need to set this back. I'm going to set it to this 2010 one. Sometimes you can get like version issues if you do two newer versions. So I'm going to try 2010 and see if that works. 2010, 11, 12. And then all the rest of this I think is fine. And I'm just going to click OK, and hopefully that will suffice. Now I'm going to hop over to Revit, and then I'm going to go to create a new family. Now I need to consider the parts of the family I'm creating. So if you remember back to my requirements, I want you to have at least one nested component. So for this light fixture, the best thing for me to create a nested component of is the shade. Okay, and then I'm going to then nest that shade into the rest of the family, and the rest of the family will be created within sort of a light fixture family template. Okay, but since I'm just creating some basic geometry right now, the template I want to select is generic model. Okay. Okay, after I've done that, I want to switch to a front elevation view, or any elevation view really is fine. But since I'm going to be working off of an elevation view for this line work, I'm going to choose an elevation view within my family template file. Next, I'm going to go up here to Insert and then Import CAD. And I'm going to go and select my light fixture line work DWG file and then open that. Okay, so it might not always import it in the right location. So in this case, I had to zoom out a bit and find it. So once I've located it within my viewport, I'm going to select it and then unpin it so I can move it, and I'm going to move it closer to my origin. Okay, so now that I have that moved in, I need to scale this. All right, so if I try to scale this by selecting it and then going to the scale button, you can see that the scale button is grayed out, which is a problem because I can't do anything with it at this point. So to fix that, what we have to do is make sure this is selected and then go up here to explode and do a full explode on the CAD drawing. This might take a second and then it might throw an error or two, but it should work. So where it says can't keep elements joined, I'm just going to click unjoin elements. And then you can see I have just a series of individual line segments after it exploded. Okay, now that I have this, what I want to do is actually group all of these lines back together so that I can manage them a little bit easier. So I'm going to, again, highlight all these lines. And then I'm going to go down here in the bottom right corner where you see this little filter icon. I'm going to click on that. Okay, now that I'm in my filter, I want to make sure that I'm only selecting line work. So you can see I have these lines here at layer 1, and then I also have reference planes. Since I don't want the reference planes, I'm going to uncheck that, and then I'm going to click apply, and then OK. All right, now that I only have the lines selected, I'm going to create a group to group all these lines together. So the create group button is right here. So I'm going to select that. And then it's going to ask me to name the group. So I'm just going to call this line work. And then I'll click OK. Okay, now that they're grouped together, you can see they have this sort of dashed line around them. And then I still cannot scale them. So to scale line work, you actually have to do it inside of the group. So to edit the group itself, I just need to double click on the group, and that's going to take me to the group editor. And I know I'm within the group editor because the background turns this yellow shade. All right, now I can select all the line work. And since I'm in the group editor, I don't have to worry about selecting anything I don't want. And now that I have all the lines selected, I can now scale them. All right, but I need to know what size to scale them to. So we're going to have to refer to the product dimensions. So I'm going to go back here to the Wayfair page and see if I can locate some dimensions for the family. Okay. So it looks like the diameter of the globe is 9.8 inches based on this. And it looks like it's also 9.9 inches high, but we really only need one of those dimensions to create this. So most likely this 9.8 inches is what we're going to need. I'm just going to look back at the main product page and see if I can find any other dimensions that are listed. Weight and dimensions. Shade height, so 8.9 inches. And okay, so the actual fixture, The diameter is 9.8 inches, so that's what I'm going to work with. So I'm going to minimize that, and then what I want to do is go in here and I'm going to go to the Create tab, and then I'm going to try creating a model line and see if that will do it for me. So click on model line. Then I'm going to zoom in here on the left side, and I'm going to try to find the point that's the middle of this sort of globe shape. And I'm going to click there. Then I'm going to drag to the right, and I'm going to enter a dimension of 9.8 inches and then hit enter. Okay, after that's done drawing, click escape. Now I have this model line that I can use as a reference. So again, I'm going to highlight everything, but then I'm going to deselect my model line because I don't want that to scale as well. So I'm going to hold my shift key and then click on the model line to deselect it, and then I can go ahead and do my scale. So click on the scale button. Then I'm going to click on the endpoint here. And then my second endpoint is going to be all the way over here on the right side. And then I'm going to scale down to that 9.8 inches that I created. Just like that. So now I know that everything is scaled correctly. Next, I can go ahead and just delete out that reference line. And then I can finish editing the actual group. All right, now that everything is the correct size, I'm going to move this to the middle. Let's try that again. Okay, now once it's moved, I can go ahead and I can start kind of modeling on top of this line work. So this family that I'm in right now, this is going to be the family that's nested into the rest of the light fixture. So for this family, I'm only going to be creating the actual globe here and then the light bulb that goes inside of the globe. And then within the other family, I'm going to be creating sort of this cover piece at the top, and then the actual cord that is suspending the light fixture. All right, so what I'm going to do now is go to my Create tab, and then I'm going to be creating a revolve. All right, so this is a little bit of a new piece of geometry that we haven't done yet. But a revolve is basically a profile that is spun around a central axis. So I'm going to start here with my revolve by creating my axis line that the profile is going to spin around. So I'm going to click here on my middle reference plane, and then I'm just going to draw this blue line straight up. And this, it doesn't have to be any specific dimension at all. It's just defining the location of the axis. So it can literally be any dimension that you want. Just make sure that it's in the correct spot. Then what we need to do is draw our actual profile, and that's done by clicking on this boundary line. So with that selected, I can now go ahead and I can start drawing in my shape. So first what I want to do is, again, locate this midpoint that I had used for the scaling. So I think right there is good. And then I'm going to just draw to the right until I get the entire width of that globe. This is just going to be a reference line. It's going to be deleted in a minute. But then what I'm going to do is use my circle shape, and we'll see if we can get somewhere close to what we need with that. So I'm going to find this midpoint here, and then I'm going to draw my circle straight up, and I'm going to make sure I get this aligned with sort of my globe. Okay, so it's slightly off. Actually, let's just do it to this. Yeah, that looks pretty good. So I'm just going to draw a circle from here and draw it all the way to that straight reference line that I created. Once I have that, so it's not perfect, but that's going to be totally fine. Nobody's even going to notice the difference. I can delete out this straight line that I created. And then I can actually use some of this line work that's already in there. So if I go to my pick lines tool, I should be able to just use that and then recreate this line work. I could have even done this to all of these segments if I wanted to, so I could match this perfectly. But the reason I didn't do that is because these are all divided into little segments and it wouldn't work very well. So you want to recreate as much as you can using the Revit tools from scratch. But if you find line work that is just a straight long segment like this, you can totally just use the pick lines tool and just click on them and just use the original line work. That actually works really well if you're creating something with a lot of straight edges. So it's not as good for this where you have a bunch of like curved segments, but things that aren't going to end up being like subdivided with a bunch of segments are going to work really well. So now that I've selected that, I'm just going to use some of my split tools and I'm going to clean this up a little bit. So since I'm revolving my circle around this central axis, that's going to mean that I need to create the profile of half a circle because it's going to be spinning around 360 degrees. If I hover over the boundary line to get my little tooltip, you can kind of get an illustration of what we're creating. So the pink line that you're seeing right there is the profile. The blue line is the axis. And then once we do the final revolve, it's going to be creating the gray shape or silver shape that you're seeing there where it sort of looks like a little spool of yarn or something. All right, so we're basically just creating the profile of like half the object, and then once it's spun around, it's going to create the entire thing. So what I need to do is use my split tool, and I'm going to split my circle in 2 locations. Let's see, we'll split it there, and then since the other portion of the profile is going to be up here, I'm going to split it over here off to the right somewhere. Once I've done that, I'm going to click escape, and then this portion of it can just be selected and deleted. Okay, after I've done that, I'm just going to clean this up with my trim and extend tool. So we're going to click on that and then select these 2 pieces, and then that's going to clean up that transition right there. And then since I only want half of this, I'm going to select this bottom line and I'm going to drag this back to the midpoint. Okay, next I'm going to have to sort of do the same thing up here. So I want to then grab this and I want to drag this back to the midpoint as well, if I can find it. Okay, and in this case you can see it doesn't want to select the midpoint. So what I'm going to have to do here is draw another temporary line to snap it to. So if I create a straight line and align it with this reference plane, I should be able to then grab this and then snap it back to that line at the intersection like that. Okay, so that's a good start, but there's a little bit more that has to be done. So this has to have a thickness for it to be a valid shape. All right, so since we've only drawn 2 lines right now, there's no thickness to this globe. So we're going to have to offset this to give it a little bit of thickness so that Revit will consider it a valid shape and it will create the geometry correctly. So what I'm going to do is go up here to offset, and then I'm going to only offset this by a very small amount. Maybe like 1/8 of an inch or 1/4 of an inch would be good. So we'll do 1/8 of an inch. And then I'm going to hover over this and I'm going to make sure that it is offsetting toward the inside. And then I'm going to click my tab to hopefully get both in one go. And it doesn't want to, so we'll just have to do these individually. So I'm just going to I'm going to offset to the inside one at a time. So that one and then that one. So you can see I have my thickness there. And then I actually have to go in and finish off this end by connecting them, or else it will still be invalid. So switch back to the line tool and then connect both of these pink lines together, and then do the same thing at the top. So up here at the top, just connect both of these lines together. and then that should be a valid shape. So if I go in here then and click the finish edit mode, it should create a nice globe shape for me, like that. I can switch to then the 3D view and I can take a look at it. So if I go here to my shaded view, you can see now I have that sort of globe shape that has been revolved around. Okay, now that I've done that, actually I do notice a small problem. So if you look here at the bottom, you can see the bottom is totally flat. And that's because I actually created a bottom piece for this. So it's always good to check your geometry and make sure it's looking correct. So since there's a flat bottom piece here, we're not going to be able to like emit the light out of it. So we actually have to fix that. So what I need to do is switch back to my front view really quick, and then I'm going to click on my revolve and then go to edit revolve. So to fix this problem where I created this bottom here that I didn't really take into account, I'm just going to highlight these 3 lines and delete them. And then I'm going to connect my lines back here to one another. So from there to there should be okay. And then when I click OK again to finish that, oh, I got to redefine my axis. So go back here, up here to my axis line and then draw that back in to the middle. Once I confirm that, there we go. So that's what I wanted. If I switch back to the 3D view, now you can see that's nice and open and I can actually see up into the globe. Okay, so that's what I was looking for. Now what I'm going to do is go back to my elevation and I'm going to create the light bulb. All right. And also this little socket piece. So to do that, I'm going to create a new revolve. And technically you could create all of these things in one go, but the reason you want to break them up into separate objects is so you can assign different materials to them. All right, so for this piece now, I'm going to just do a rectangle, and I'm going to simplify this a little bit. So I'm just going to go from this point here down to this point here on the bottom right. And then I'm going to just add in sort of a straight piece on top of this, or like another little rectangle. So if I just simplify this to something like that, and remember we only want half of this. So I'm going to pull these lines back until I get half. Delete that out, pull this one back there. And then connect these together. That should be good for my light bulb socket. So we'll have to draw the axis back in, so the axis always goes in on that green line. So click the green check mark, and now I should have a little bit of a socket piece up in there. So if I rotate up, you can see there's my little light bulb socket. Okay. Then what I want to do is actually create the light bulb itself. So since we're not going to actually be seeing the piece that gets screwed into the socket, we can just create sort of the glass piece down here. So again, I'm going to create a new revolve. I'm going to define first my axis line, which is the green. Then I'm going to switch over to my boundary line. And then for this, I'm just going to use the pick lines. And I'm going to try to get all these line segments so that I can make this as accurate as possible. For something really small like this, a bunch of segments don't really matter too much. So just going to use my pick lines tool until I get halfway along here, like that. And then I'm just going to finish off this half of the profile so I get something like that. Then I can just click the green check and that should finish my light bulb how I want it. Now you can see that's the effect of having all those little line segments. So it actually creates all these little segmented pieces, which is not super nice, right? So again, if you didn't like that and you wanted to fix it, you can just go back here and then you can re-edit this. And you could switch all these to be sort of a spline, which would make it a little bit nicer. So if you were to do this spline tool and then go in and sort of trace some of these points, if you hold shift, you can select some of these points along the curve, and it can be a little bit hard to select at times, but if you just get as close as you can, and it's actually a little bit easier not holding shift, just kind of trace over this. Like so. Make sure that those ends are connected, and then you can even go back and just drag these points to match it a little bit better. And then if you click OK, and then look at the result, you can see that is a lot cleaner than the original one without all the segments. All right, but that looks pretty good. So then what we can do is just click tab until we get that little piece, and then we can just move it up into position. So if I move this straight up and lock it to the bottom of that socket, and then I switch back to my 3D view and rotate up, you can see I have my little socket piece with my light bulb attached to it. All right, the final thing that I'm going to add to this family is the little metal cap that sort of goes on top of the globe itself. So let's go back to my reference. I'm going to be creating that little black piece right there that sort of sits on top of everything. All right, so to do that, I'm going to, again, do another revolve, create revolve. I'm going to specify my axis line, and then I'm going to start out by creating my boundary lines. So I want to make sure that this is a little bit bigger than the glass itself, and since I created the glass a little bit bigger than my reference, I'm going to have to make this a little bit bigger as well. So I'm going to start here at this line, that's the bottom piece of the metal. I'm going to draw straight out until I get to roughly where my line is. And actually, something that I could do to make this a little bit easier is I can cancel this. So I'm just trying to show you a bunch of techniques that you can use whenever you're making these families, okay? So it's not like you have to be doing this live with me, but just watch what I'm doing to get ideas. So as you do this, though, you sort of get ideas of ways that you can make things easier. So if I go back here and just exit out of that and then click on my original globe shape, I can actually just select my curve that I have here, and I can copy that to my clipboard. And then if I just exit back out of that and then go back to create a new revolve, if I go to my boundary line, I should be able to paste that so that I have a perfect reference. So if I go to here under paste and then click on align to selected levels and then click OK, there we go. It pastes it back in the perfect location, and now I can actually snap to it. So if I create that straight line again, I can actually snap it perfectly to that location there. And then I'm just going to use my trim and extend tool to clean that up, and then I'm going to finish that off right here. Okay, actually no, I'm going to also add in this piece up here. So I'm just gonna draw that up to this point and then make that go down to there, and then extend that up, and then extend this line back till it touches right there. Let's just take a look at our reference one more time. Okay, that should be pretty good. It's such a small piece that you won't really notice it anyway. But if you wanted to add a little bit more detail, you could even go in here and use your fillet tools and kind of create like small little radiuses to round over the corners and stuff. But we don't need to go into a ton of detail. Oh, have to create our axis line again. Always make sure you do that. So there's our axis line, and then we'll click OK. And if we go to a 3D view, we should be able to see that little piece that we just made. All right, now that we made that, there's one small thing I'm going to fix with my globe. So something you want to avoid is a situation like this. And I intentionally did this so that you could see sort of the issue. When I click on one of my shapes, you can see it is perfectly in the same spot as this top cap, which is causing some issues. So it causes this weird little situation. It's actually technically known as Z-fighting, where you have two surfaces in the exact same spot, and that will create like a weird flickering effect if you were to do a rendering or a walkthrough and you were able to see that component. So you always want to avoid that situation. So since I've created this, what I'm going to need to do is go back in and edit this globe one more time and sort of lop off the top piece. All right, so I'm going to switch back to my front view, click on my globe, edit the revolve, and then I just want to edit this back till it aligns with the bottom of my sort of metal piece that I put in there. So we'll pull that back to that point and then connect these two lines with a straight segment, and then do the same with this bottom line. And then we just have to make sure we're deleting out this little vertical piece. All right, everything there looks good. So then I can just click finish, and then that should fix the issue. So now if I go back to my 3D view and I select one of these, you can see they're no longer interfering with one another because I've sort of cut the top piece off of it. All right, so that's looking pretty good. The final thing, well, there's a couple more things I need to do, but I'm going to switch back to my view, and I don't need my CAD import anymore. So I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to delete that out of here. And then I'm just going to select everything that I created, and I'm going to drag it and move it straight down until it's sitting nicely on the reference level plane at the bottom. Okay, so you always want to make sure that everything is sort of sitting on these crosshairs and that everything is centered within the project. Also make sure that it's centered within the floor plan view as well. All right, now that I've done that, I need to add in a couple of constraints. So I'm going to switch to my front view. And since I'm nesting this into another family that's going to have the cord attached to it, I have to make sure that I can snap the family to the cord at this point here. To do that, I have to add in a reference plane. So I'm going to go to the Create tab, and then I'm going to click on Reference Plane. And I'm going to draw in a reference plane right here. And I'm just going to name this Top of Globe. And then I'm going to line this reference plane to the top of my shape there. All right, sometimes this is hard to do if you've like added in these little rounded segments. So I'm actually just going to remove those and straighten this out like that. Now I should be able to, there we go. Now I can actually align that. So if I click Align there and then click on my reference plane and then lock it, that should work as I want it to. Okay. Now that that is done, I'm going to add in a few material parameters so that I can adjust the material of these different components. So if I look at this here, I'm going to add in 3 different material parameters. The first one I'm going to do is a material parameter to control the piece that's made of glass, so the actual globe. The second one is going to be for the light bulb, so I can add an emissive material to that to make it look like it's glowing. And then the final one is going to be for all these metal pieces. So these two will actually be the same material. So I'm going to start out with the globe. And this one would be a good one to do as an instance parameter. Because, for example, maybe you want to have a globe that is made of glass like this. Or maybe you want to have a globe that's actually solid and it's painted a color. So making this an instance parameter could make this pretty versatile so that you could, have several in an area, and some could be glass and some could be solid. So I'm going to click on my new material parameter button, and then I'm going to create a new parameter and make it an instance, and I'm going to call this globe. Okay, and then click OK again. Next, I'm going to select my light bulb. I'm going to click on my material parameter button, create a new one, and then since this is always going to be the same material, right, you're never going to have a light bulb that's different other than an emissive glowing material. We're just going to make that a type parameter. So I'm going to call this one light bulb. And then these two, I'm going to hold control and select both of these pieces. And again, do that one more time. And I'm going to create a new parameter. And then I'm going to make this one a type, and I'm just going to call it metal. Okay. And then click OK. So then that should be pretty much it for the globe family. So once I've done that, I'm just going to save this as a family. And I'm just going to choose my location. Create a new folder. And then I'll call that globe. Okay. After that's done, I'm going to create the new family that we're going to nest this into. So go to File, New, Family. Now this is where the family template becomes a little bit more important. Since this is a light fixture, I want to choose the right type of family template that will have everything that I need to make this a correct light fixture to use in Revit. So the one that I'm looking for is lighting fixture ceiling based. Okay, so since this is a pendant light, it's going to be mounted to the ceiling, so we want to make sure that is a ceiling based family. We get the little preview up here, and we can see that there's a light source definition, and that's what we want, so we'll click open. All right, so within this family template, you can see a couple things. First of all, it looks very similar to the previous family templates we've used, but there's 2 noticeable differences. First, we have this square thing, which if you click on, it says basic ceiling. This is basically a placeholder ceiling to replicate what is going to happen within the Revit project when you load it in. This will never show up in an actual project. It's only there for reference within the family itself. Second thing is the yellow light source definition here. This is what we actually use to emit light within the Revit project, okay? So what I'm going to do now is nest my globe family into this one. All right, so I'm going to first save this, save as family, and then I'm going to find the name of that light fixture. So this one is the SNEED 1 light single globe pendant. So I'm just going to copy that name. And I'm going to paste that there as the name of the family. And then we're going to save it. And then I'm going to close out of my unnecessary tabs I've opened and then go back to my globe. And I'm going to load this into the project and close. All right, once that's loaded in, I'm just going to click once to place it. And we won't be able to see that actual family because it's placed at the reference level, and our actual floor plan when we're in a template is the ceiling plan by default. So we're looking at the reflected ceiling plan, and since it's way below that plane, we don't actually see it. But if we go to the floor plan, we can see it. So now what I want to do is go to my left view or any elevation really, and I'm just going to grab that globe piece and I'm just going to move it upward a little bit so that we get it relatively close. And then I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to associate all the parameters that I created within the globe family to this new family I'm nesting in. So what I need to do is click on my globe, and then I need to find all those parameters I created. So first I had my material for the globe that I created as an instance, and that will show up right here underneath of the properties palette. So now I have to actually create an additional globe parameter and sort of link that all the way through so that I get full control over that parameter within the project. Again, I talked about this when we were doing the shelving unit, but if you do not link all these parameters through, like I'm doing here, whenever you go to the actual project and you try to change the materials of a nested family, you're not going to be able to. It won't even give you the option. So you're going to have to go here and associate a parameter, and you're just basically doing the exact same thing you did within the globe family. So you're just, again, creating the exact same parameter. So this one will be globe, and it's going to be an instance just like the last one. Click OK, and then click OK. And then once you do that, this becomes grayed out and it becomes tied with the equal sign to the new parameter. Next, I need to go to this edit type, and I need to find my other two material parameters, and I need to do the same thing. So we're going to create a new one, and this one is going to be a type, and this one's going to be called light bulb. Okay, and then okay again. And then for the metal 2, we're going to create a new one, and then this one's going to be called metal. Okay. And then we're going to click apply, and then we're going to click OK. So that should be good for all of my parameters that I've tied through here. Next, what I want to do is actually make this light source definition so that it's emitting from the correct spot. So if you think about a light bulb or like a light fixture in general, the source of the light's coming from the light bulb, and it's coming from inside the center of the light bulb right here. So this yellow circle basically needs to be in the middle of this light bulb. But there's not really a good way for us to do that. There's no way that right now we can lock this light source to the center of the light bulb. If I tried to align that right, there's nothing for me to select to actually lock it in that position and have the two tied together. Okay, so this tells me that I need to go back in and I need to add in a couple more reference planes to this family. And then I also need to add in a reference plane here at the bottom of the family as well, so that I have a good spot to move the family up and down with. All right, so this is sort of the process of creating these families. You're always going to have to go back and forth between them and add in things whenever you notice that there needs to be a modification made. So I'm going to click on my globe family again, and I'm going to edit family to go back to it. We'll just click on unjoin elements. Not sure why it's giving me that error, honestly. And then we're just going to add in a couple of reference planes. So the first one I'm going to add in is one that's in the middle of this light bulb. So create and then reference plane. And then I'm just going to draw it here, sort of through the light bulb. And then I'm going to click on it and sort of fine tune it with my arrow keys to get it somewhere roughly in the middle of the light bulb itself. Then I'm just going to name that center of light bulb, just like that. And that's all I need to do. Then down here at the bottom, you can see I have this reference plane that's already in here. But if you look over here on the left side, it says not a reference. So what I can do is just change that to be a reference. You can either do a weak or a strong reference. It doesn't really matter, I don't think. And then I'm just going to name this bottom of globe. And then I think that's all that I need to do. So I'm just going to save that and then load it back in. And if I have to change anything about it, I can always re-edit it. So save, load in, and close. And then once I'm here, I'm just going to overwrite the existing version. Hopefully I don't get any errors. Okay, so now that I'm back to this point, I'm going to go ahead and use my align tool. And I'm going to find that reference plane that I made. So there you can see I have a reference for the center of the light bulb now. And I'm going to click on that and then click on the reference plane for the light source and then lock it to it. Now you saw that little error message that I got there. If you didn't get a chance to read that, go just rewind and pause it. Basically what that's saying is I put the light source within a solid piece of geometry. So you can see since I put it inside this light bulb that I made, it's telling me that's going to cause a problem because it's within a solid piece of geometry. But since we're making this a glass material, it's going to be just fine. As long as you do actually make it a glass material. If you don't do that, you could always move the reference plane within the globe family down a little bit so that it's somewhere down in here, and that would work perfectly fine as well. But since I know everything's going to be glass, I'm going to make it as accurate as possible, and I'm just going to put it within the light bulb itself. Okay, so now the two of these are locked together. So if I were to click on this light source elevation and drag it up and down, the globe moves with it, which is perfect. The only other thing that I need to do is add in a reference plane at the bottom to control the actual fixture height suspension from the ceiling. So I'm going to create a new reference plane and just draw it in down here. And again, I'm going to call this one bottom of globe. All right, and then I'm going to use my align tool, and I'm going to align that to the one that I made within the globe family and then lock it. And now if I pull that, you can see it gives me a little bit of an error. It's trying to like pull it away from the one I already locked. So that means I'm going to have to add in one more constraint. So what I basically need to do is create a dimension between the two of these and then lock that dimension so that it stays fixed. So to do that, we're going to go to annotate. We're going to go to aligned, and I'm going to add in a dimension there to this reference plane here. Then I'm just going to finish that dimension, and then I'm going to click the lock icon, and hopefully that will resolve my little error. So now if I try to drag this up and down, you can see I'm not getting that error anymore, and everything is moving together just the way I want it. Okay, now that that's done, we're going to be adding in the other pieces of the light fixture. So let's go back to our sketch that we have. So we're going to be drawing in our little piece that we have up here at the top, and then also this rod that's coming down. Okay, so for this, let me see if I can get a couple more dimensions, if they have that listed for the actual mounting piece. Okay, so under other dimensions, you can see it says canopy. So that's that little round piece at the top that mounts to the ceiling. So that's going to have 4.7 inch diameter, and then it's going to be 1 inch tall. So that's all I really need to worry about. So what I'm going to do here is create another revolve. So revolve. And then we're going to create our axis line here in the middle, like so. Go back to my boundary. Now the entire thing is 4.7 inches. Since that doesn't divide very cleanly, I'm just going to draw 4.7 inches here off to the side. And then once I have that, I'm just going to find the midpoint and then move this from the midpoint to the bottom of the ceiling here in the middle. So the midpoint to the midpoint of this vertical reference plane. Then you can just grab this piece on the end and then just drag that back, and then you have a perfectly divided in half 4.7 inches. So then the actual depth of this thing, or the height of it, is going to be 1 inch. So I'll draw a line down 1 inch. Then I'm going to draw it back to the center. Now, if I look back at my diagram, you can see there's this small little piece down here as well. And then that's going to transition down into the actual stem or cord of the pendant. So we're going to add in those two pieces to this revolve as well, just to make it a little bit easier on ourselves. Okay, so we'll have to guess on sort of the diameter of that. So I'm just going to, let's see, I'm going to drag this back a little bit, and then I'm going to create an inference line right here, and then draw this back maybe 1/4 of an inch. Okay, then I'm just going to move this down, move 1/2 an inch or so. Then I can just grab this piece, drag it back until I get to the intersection between the two, and then connect the two of them together. And then lastly, I'm going to add in a little segment for the cord. Now the cord is going to be sort of a variable dimension, but we can actually just build it right into this revolve that we're creating right now. And you'll see in a minute what I mean by that. So I'm going to click here on this midpoint and then drag down a little bit. That should be good enough. Next, I'm just going to clean up this profile, and then I'm going to finish up the profile by creating another couple of segments. So the small little segment here, bring that to the middle, and then draw another segment straight up and connect all this together. So this is my profile now. I'm going to be revolving. After that, I'm just going to click on, actually I might add in a little thing there to make it a little bit nicer, since I'm not going to have to worry about aligning that. So if I use my fillet tool, we'll just add in a small radius there to the corner to make it just look a little bit cleaner. If you can ever add in these little rounded segments to your families, it just makes it look better once you render things, so that you don't have a bunch of like hard edges everywhere. Makes it look less like it was made by a computer, and it's a little bit more realistic. So I'll just add in a couple of those, and then I'll click on the green check to finish it. Now that it's revolved, you can see I have my little canopy piece with the actual stem or cord sticking out of it at the bottom. And then what I can do is use my align tool, and I can align the bottom of this revolve to my reference plane within my globe family. Actually, let's do that the other way. Let's click this first, and then click the bottom of the revolve, and then lock it. Okay, so now that should be locked to it. And if I were to grab one of these reference planes, okay, it doesn't like that. So I might have to modify that a little bit. Let me think here for a second. Okay, so what I need to do is create in a couple more reference planes and constraints, similar to what I did here. So I'm just going to grab my revolve and I'm going to drag this back up with the little grip that I have there. And I'm going to add in a new reference plane right there. And this one I don't really need to give a name to, it doesn't really matter. But I'm going to use my align tool and I'm going to click a line right there and I'm going to align this reference plane to it and then I'm going to lock the two together. So with that being done, I can click on this reference plane and drag it and I don't get any errors and the stem piece moves with it. Then what I need to do is align this to the top of the globe. So I'm going to find my reference plane within the globe family, click on that, and then align my new reference plane to it and then lock it together. Then the final thing I have to do to make this all work is create one more constraint, very similar to what I did here. So I'm going to have to add in a new dimension. So I'm going to click on annotate, aligned, and then add in a new dimension from there to there, and then lock it. Now with that done, I should be able to grab any of these reference planes and drag the whole thing up and down, and it's going to move however I want it to. And you can see there, it all moves together and it doesn't throw any errors. The final thing with this is then creating a parameter so that we can control how far this is dropping down from the ceiling within the project itself. All right, so to do that, it's pretty simple. All we have to do is, again, go to annotate and then choose an align dimension. And then we're going to create a dimension from the ceiling reference plane right here to the bottom reference plane right here. And then just put this off to the side. Now with that done, I can click on it and then tie a dimension parameter to it by going up here to label and then click on create parameter. Next, I'm just going to give this a name of suspension from ceiling, and then we can make this an instance parameter so that if, let's say you have a cluster of these and you want them to all be different heights, that's when you would want to use an instance parameter. So we're just going to click on OK. And now we should be able to flex this and see if it actually works correctly. So up here in family types, we're going to go to suspension from ceiling and then just up that to maybe like 4 feet, and then hopefully everything moves correctly. So there we go. You can see that that all moved correctly, just how I want it to. You could also probably do this the opposite way. So if you didn't want a suspension from ceiling and instead you wanted a height from finished floor, you could add in I'm not 100% sure if this will work, but you could create a reference plane down here at the bottom and then align that reference plane to the reference level like that, and then create a dimension between them like we did previously, and then give that a parameter name. So you could call that height AFF, so above finished floor, and then click OK. And then we'll see if that one works. So let's see, let's try maybe 4 feet from the floor. There we go. So you could do it that way as well, whatever you want. Okay, so that's looking pretty good. Just a few more things that we need to do until this is totally finished. For one, we have to add in a material parameter to our chord piece. All right, so to do that, again, we're just going to select it, click on associate parameter, and then we're going to create a new one for our chord. And actually, something that we could do is we can just leave that as is. So I'm going to cancel it. Since I know that this is the same metal material as what's down here, I'm just going to click on metal and just tie it to that so that it'll all be tied together. So that'll do it for that, for the material. And then let me think. The final thing that I want to do is set up some different presets, so some family types for this. So for instance, let's say we had one that was a glass material, and we had one that was a like a solid metal material for the globe, or maybe like one is like a red stem and then one of them is a black stem or something like that. What we can do is create a family type. So I'm going to call this one glass globe. And then I'm going to make another one and I'm going to call that a solid globe. Like that. After I've done that, I just need to go in and add in some custom materials to these to differentiate the two of them. Okay. And you usually want to set up all your materials within the family itself rather than just leaving everything as default, like a default gray material, than doing it with the project, because that just makes the family a lot more flexible. Like you're going to load it in and it's already going to have the materials that you need for it. So I'm going to start out with my glass globe, and I'm going to go here where it says globe default, and then where it says by category, I'm going to click the 3 dots. That's going to bring up my family editor, and then I just want to add in some materials for this. So right here where this says glass, I'm going to swap in some nicer materials from the pre-made library. So we're going to start out with our default glass that we have here, but we're going to make it a little bit better. So I'm going to go to the Appearance tab, and then I'm going to click on the Swap Asset button, and that's going to bring up my asset browser. And now what I want to do is find just a nice glass material. So I'm going to search for glass, and anything within this asset browser that does not have the little triangle is going to render nicely. So you can see all these ones have that little triangle next to them, but these ones here at the bottom don't. So that's what I'm going to use. So I'm just going to use one of these glass clear, or you could even use like frosted or something else if you wanted to, but I'm going to use this maybe we'll try the gray glass. We'll see what that does. So glass gray, swap that in by hitting that little button and then exit out. And that now overrode the old definition, and you can even go in here and change some of these different material properties if you wanted to. You could even switch this to be a different render object so you get a better preview of what it's going to look like. Maybe like a vase. There, so that gives us a pretty good idea of what our globe is going to look like. Now with that done, I can click apply, and then OK, and then apply one more time. And now you can see my globe is see-through, which is awesome. Okay, then for the light bulb. So here, I want to do this as an emissive material. So I'm going to create a new material, rename that, and I'm just going to call this emissive. Basically what an emissive material is just a material that is actually going to throw out light when you render it. Now if I go to appearance and then I swap this, we'll see if there's any emissive materials in here. I'm not sure that there is. We might have to make our own from scratch. Okay, I don't see anything. So what I'm going to do is just swap in one of these default materials, one of the ones that's going to render nicely, like this ABS one, and then I'll close out of that. And then I'm going to, within here, toggle on the emissivity, and I'm going to give that a little bit of a warm color. that a light bulb would have. And then we can turn up the luminance so that it's actually glowing. And then let me think here. Going to want to make this transparent. Okay, actually it's not letting me make this transparent, so what I'm going to do is switch this back to a default material. For some reason this one doesn't have the option for me to change that, so I'm just going to delete this out and then remake it. And then over here, I'm going to toggle on self-illumination. And then we have a bunch of presets that we can choose from. Let's just try lampshade interior. And then here you can actually choose your color temperature, so maybe like an incandescent bulb. And then here I can go to my transparency, and I can toggle my transparency and actually make this totally 100% transparent, so that the actual light source within it is going to be emitting light out into my my project when I render it. I might also have to just bump up this emissive value a little bit, but it's one of those things where when you're rendering with trial and error, you'll have to adjust this value. So once that's done, just click OK and then apply, and then my light bulb should update. Let me see if it's actually linked properly. Okay, light bulb set to emissive. Let me just make sure that my light bulb within my globe is set correctly. Okay, so it seems to be working fine. It just doesn't really show up very well in the viewport. So I'll close out of that. Maybe if I switch to a different view style, let's try realistic. There we go. So now you can see that looks a little bit better. It actually looks like it's glowing the color that I want. And then the last thing to do is set the material for the metal. So we're going to go up to our family types, and then we're going to go to where it says metal, and we're going to add in one more material. So create a new material, and I'm going to rename this to maybe like black steel or something. And then I'll go to the appearance tab, and again I'm going to swap out for a new asset. So let's see in here if we can find a decent metal material. Let's see, there's chrome, there's copper. Is there like a steel? Let's just try aluminum. Okay, there's a dark aluminum. So I'm going to swap that in. Then we're going to let it update, and then I'm going to bring the roughness up so that it's not so glossy. Something like that, and then I'm going to make it a little bit darker. So we get sort of like a nice painted metal look. Then I'm just going to click on apply and then OK. And then now that I have that, click on apply. And then That should be good. Now you can see that is all updated. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy this, and I'm going to go back to my solid globe, and you can see now it's going to reset the materials. So if I switch that back, it's going to set these all back to their basic default material. So for the metal, paste that in and apply it. Okay, so that changes. For the light bulb, set that to emissive, and then click apply. And that should have changed the light bulb, but we can't see it. Then for the globe, this is where I'm going to change this from glass to a solid. So again, we're going to create one more new material, and I'm just going to duplicate this. So I'm going to right click on it and then duplicate the material, and I'm going to call this solid, or maybe red steel. Okay, and then I need to go to the appearance tab, and up here, since I duplicated that material, there's a little 1 in the hand up here. I have to click on the duplicate button here then, so that I don't mess up the other material. If I don't do that, it's gonna do the same thing that I do to this red steel to the black steel, and I don't want that. So now I'm just gonna change the color of this to like red or something. Okay, and then click apply. Maybe a less aggressive shade of red. Something like that. And now if I click apply, that should turn my shade red, like that, and then okay. Perfect. So now what I have here is pretty much a finished pendant light fixture. And if I go up here to my family types, I should have a solid globe and a glass globe that I can toggle between. And if I click apply, I can switch between the two different types, which is pretty cool. Okay, and then I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to save the family. All right, after I've done that, now it's time to test it to make sure it all works. So I'm going to create a new project, file, and then new project. And I'm just going to choose my architectural template and then click OK. And now what I want to do is just create a basic ceiling to mount this light fixture to. So if I go to my ceiling plan and I go to ceiling, and I'm just going to create a just gypsum wallboard ceiling, and then sketch that, make a rectangle, something like that, and then click OK. Now what I can do is switch back to my family, load into project, and then I can, now you can see that I can host it directly to that ceiling. If I hover over here, it's not going to let me because it knows it's a light fixture. So I can place it directly on that ceiling, maybe place a few of them to get a little cluster going to see how our instance parameter is working. And then I'm going to switch over to my 3D view to rotate around and take a look at it. All right, so if I zoom in here, you can see I have my 3 pendant lights in a little cluster. Switch over to a realistic view. And then you can see by default they're all the glass type, but I can select one of them, and I now have this under my type selector. If I click the drop down, I get the solid globe option, and I can click apply, and then that should make that one solid, hopefully. Nope, I guess it didn't. So that means there's a problem in my family. So I'm just going to have to make sure that I fix that. Okay, so since this is an instance parameter, that's probably why it's doing that. Right. Okay, so that means that this would make more sense as a type parameter, obviously. Duh, that was a dumb thing for me to do. Since this is going to be a family type, I got to switch this to be a type parameter and click apply. And then what I could do is make sure that my height above finished floor, that's set to an instance parameter. So since it has this default right here, I know that that's an instance parameter. So that would satisfy the requirements because I have at least one instance parameter, but then I also have type parameters. So I'm going to leave that, all three of those materials as types, and then click apply and then OK. And then that should fix the problem if I load it back in and overwrite. So we're going to overwrite. There we go. So now if I click on that and then toggle between my two different types, there we go. You can see it switches between solid and glass, which is cool. And as you can see here, my height above finished floor is set to 4 feet by default. But then I can go in there and I can change that. So if I want this one higher, I can make this one 5 foot. And then maybe I make this one 6 foot. Just like that. There we go. Now we have a little cluster of them, which is pretty cool. Okay. The only last thing that I would mention in this video is if I go back here, you can modify the default instance parameter that this is loaded into the project with. So for example, you know how when I load in it said 4 foot is the default? Well, I could make it so that if I always wanted this to be like, that's obviously way too low because you wouldn't want a pendant light to only be 4 foot above the ground. So if you set this to something like 7 foot though, by default, and then click apply, that could work a little bit better. It looks bad in this instance right here because of where the where it's set to, but yeah, you could set it to a higher dimension. What you'd really want to do, the better way to control those is to control the distance that it's being suspended from the ceiling like I had originally, instead of it being controlled by wherever that was. Instead of it being controlled by the height above the floor, it's better to control the distance that this drops down from the ceiling. But you can do it either way. So if I load this back into the project now, you're going to see them all kind of shrink. Oh, I didn't overwrite the existing version, but if I were to create a new one, it should, there we go, by default have that 7 foot above the floor. All right, so that's going to do it for this video. It was a pretty long one, but hopefully there was some good stuff in there that you picked up on for editing your families. One final thing that I didn't mention is you can actually go in here. So if you find a PDF that you like, instead of doing the whole thing I did with Adobe Illustrator, you can actually go to Insert and then Import PDF. And then you can choose that PDF file. So if I go to my downloads really quickly here, and then choose one of those PDF files and load it in, you can actually load it in and it will rasterize it. So you can see it's not like those nice clean lines, but you can easily scale this and get it the right size. And then you can just go in and draw your shapes on top of it if you wanted to, like that, and just use it sort of as an underlay. All right. But You don't have to do any of that. If you just want to find the dimensions of it and just do it that way and just make it based on the dimensions, that's fine. Yes, I want to. But that's going to pretty much do it for this video. Okay, so hopefully that was a good example and you picked up on a lot of techniques that you can use for creating your own. As a reminder, this is what it has to include. Okay, so one nested component. Mine has that because I nested the globe into the rest of the family. One dimension parameter. So my dimension was my height above the finished floor that I control how far the light fixture is suspended. At least two material parameters. The one I made just had 3 of them in there. And then 2 family types. So again, family types. That's where I went here and I created 2 different presets. So I have my glass globe and I have my solid globe. Also, you have to make sure that you have at least one of each type of parameter. So there's the instance parameter and there is the type parameter. All of my materials are type parameters. So all 3 of my materials are types because they do not have that little default value thing like this next to them. So I can tell that those are type parameters. Then my height is an instance parameter and I can tell that because it does have that default value associated with it. All right, but I think that's everything. If you have any questions about creating your family, please let me know. Just make sure that you're finding something that doesn't already exist and that you're making it from scratch and that you're meeting all the minimum requirements. But that's going to be it. Good luck making your families.